He recognized her touch before he recognized her face. As she adjusted his fiancée's gown, her fingers brushed his wrist, slow, deliberate, and his breath caught the same way it had years ago. Then she leaned close and whispered, "He's 7. And he looks exactly like you." By the time the champagne spilled and the engagement ring hit the floor, it was already too late. She stood there in black silk, fingers still scented with the groom's cologne, watching the man who once left her pregnant realize that the child gripping her hand was his punishment come alive. The bridal suite at the Grand Joseon Hotel smelled like imported lilies and expensive anxiety. Yuri Park stood before the three-way mirror in a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people's yearly salary, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her champagne flute. She was the kind of beautiful that looked calculated, every angle optimized, every strand of hair exactly where it should be. The daughter of Park Industries chairman, she had been groomed since birth to marry well, dress impeccably, and smile through anything. "The hem needs to be higher on the left side," Yuri said without looking at anyone in particular. Her voice carried the flat authority of someone who had never been told no. Amara Chen knelt at Yuri's feet with a pincushion strapped to her wrist, adjusting the silk with fingers that had learned precision in Paris ateliers and New York fashion houses. 7 years abroad had given her skills that Seoul's elite now paid premium rates for. 7 years had also given her something else entirely, something waiting in the hallway with a coloring book and questions she still didn't know how to answer. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, rehearsed it, told herself she was strong enough now. But preparation meant nothing when Ji-hoon Kang walked into the room and the air changed. He entered the way powerful men do, expecting space to be made for him. Tall, shoulders that filled out Tom Ford suits like they were designed on his body, hair swept back in that effortlessly expensive way that required 3 products and a stylist on retainer. At 33, Ji-hoon had inherited his family's pharmaceutical empire and multiplied its value. He sat on boards, played golf with politicians, and his engagement to Yuri had been called the merger of the decade by financial papers. His eyes swept the room in that quick, assessing way of his, cataloging everything, dismissing most of it. Then they landed on Amara's hands, still adjusting his fiancée's hem, and something in his perfect composure fractured. She felt it before she looked up. That specific quality of attention that used to make her skin feel electric. When their eyes finally met, she watched recognition move through him in stages. First confusion, then shock, then something that might have been pain if he still allowed himself to feel such pedestrian emotions. "Darling, this is Amara Chen," Yuri said, oblivious or pretending to be. "She's the stylist I told you about. Trained at Parsons, worked with the Vogue team in Paris. Only the best for our day." Amara arose slowly, pins still between her lips, and extended her hand with professional neutrality. "Mr. Kang." His hand enveloped hers, warm and familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, just once, a ghost of an old habit. She pulled away first. "Have we met?" Yuri asked, her tone light, but her eyes suddenly sharp. She hadn't survived Seoul's elite social circles without developing predator instincts. "No," Ji-hoon said too quickly. "I don't think so." Amara smiled, the expression not reaching anywhere near her eyes. "Common mistake. I have one of those faces." She didn't. She had the kind of face that painters wanted to capture and men wanted to possess. Mixed heritage gave her features that didn't fit neatly into any category. Exotic without being othered, approachable but untouchable. 7 years ago, Ji-hoon had told her she looked like art. 2 months before he told her she was temporary. The fitting continued with the mechanical precision of people pretending everything was normal. Yuri discussed fabric weight and train length while Ji-hoon stood too still, his eyes tracking Amara's movements with the intensity of someone trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. She could feel his mind working, calculating the years, wondering if he should say something, if she would. She had no intention of making this easy for him. When Yuri disappeared into the changing room, leaving them alone for exactly 90 seconds, Ji-hoon moved closer. Not touching, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. Different brand than he used to wear, more expensive, but it still smelled wrong on him. Everything expensive on him felt like costume jewelry on a statue. "Amara." Her name in his mouth after 7 years sounded like a confession. What are you doing here? She began gathering pins with methodical calm. Working. Some of us have to. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. She straightened, meeting his eyes with the steel she'd had to forge alone in a foreign country with a newborn who cried every night. I'm here because you rehired the best. That's me now. Surprising what you can accomplish when you have motivation. His jaw tightened. We should talk. Should we? She tilted her head, genuinely curious about his audacity. About what? The weather? Fashion week. How you're marrying the daughter of your father's biggest business partner in what I'm sure is a completely coincidental arrangement. Amara. Miss Chen, please. Let's keep it professional. After all, I'm just the help. The words landed exactly where she intended them to. 7 years ago, she had been the help too, his secretary fresh out of university, bright-eyed and stupid enough to believe that the son of a pharmaceutical dynasty could actually love someone like her. He'd called her brilliant, beautiful, irreplaceable, right up until she became pregnant, and suddenly very replaceable indeed. Yuri emerged in casual wear that cost more than Amara's monthly rent, already on her phone scheduling the next vendor meeting. Thursday at 2 for the final fitting? My assistant will send the address. Perfect. Amara said with a smile that Yuri accepted at face value, but Ji-hoon saw through completely. She was packing her kit when she heard the small voice from the doorway. Mama? I finished the coloring book. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Kai stood in the entrance, 7 years old with his mother's eyes and absolutely everything else from his father. The same strong jawline that would sharpen with age, the same thick dark hair that grew in that specific pattern, the same way of standing with his weight slightly on his left foot. He even held his head at that particular angle when he was curious, a genetic echo that no amount of distance could erase. Ji-hoon's face went absolutely white. Amara moved quickly, professional mask never slipping, gathering Kai's hand in hers. Yes, darling. Let's go. Say goodbye to Ms. Park. Goodbye, Ms. Park, Kai said with the careful politeness she'd taught him, then looked at Ji-hoon with undisguised interest. Are you getting married? Mama says weddings are about promising to stay. That seems important. The champagne flute slipped from Ji-hoon's hand, crystal shattering against marble with a sound like breaking ice. Yuri barely glanced up from her phone. Clumsy. Are you feeling all right, darling? Fine, he managed, but his eyes never left Kai's face. She could see him doing the math, counting backwards, seeing himself in miniature standing in a hotel suite he'd probably paid for. Amara squeezed Kai's hand twice, their signal that it was time to leave immediately. Thursday at 2. I'll bring fabric samples. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard footsteps behind her. Quick, determined, the sound of a man who was used to getting explanations. She pressed the elevator button repeatedly, a useless gesture, but it gave her hand something to do besides shake. Kai, darling, can you press the lobby button? The very bottom one. She kept her voice steady through practice. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. She stepped inside, pulling Kai with her, and only then did she look back at Ji-hoon standing in the hallway, engagement ring still on his finger, his entire world visibly recalibrating. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she let him see everything. The exhaustion of single motherhood, the nights spent wondering if she'd made the right choice leaving, the fierce pride in the boy beside her who was worth every sacrifice. Then she leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered loud enough for only him to hear. He's 7, and he looks exactly like you. The elevator doors closed on his devastated expression. Kai tugged her hand as they descended. Mama, that man looked sad. Did we make him sad? She knelt down to his level, smoothing hair that would never stay flat no matter how much she tried. No, baby. Some people make themselves sad by their choices. That's not our fault. Okay. He accepted this with the easy trust of children. Can we get ice cream? Yes. She pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. We can get all the ice cream you want. If you're finding this story compelling, hit that subscribe button because this is only the beginning of Amara's revenge. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. 7 years earlier, Seoul had felt like possibility wearing a city's clothes. Amara had arrived with a fresh degree, minimal Korean language skills, and the kind of naive optimism that comes from never having been truly disappointed. The job at Kong Pharmaceuticals had seemed like a gift, working directly under the youngest son, learning the business from someone brilliant and driven and only 3 years older than her. Ji-hoon had been different then, or maybe she'd just been too inexperienced to see him clearly. He'd worked late hours, talked about reforming the pharmaceutical industry, making medicine accessible rather than profitable. He'd asked her opinion on presentations, remembered her coffee order, made her feel seen in a way that was intoxicating for someone who'd spent most of her life being overlooked. The first time he kissed her was in his office at 2 in the morning, both of them exhausted from preparing a board presentation. She'd made a joke, he'd laughed, and then suddenly his mouth was on hers, and nothing else mattered. Not the power imbalance, not the risk to her job, not the fact that his family would never accept someone like her. For 8 months, they'd existed in a bubble of stolen moments and whispered promises. Hotel rooms rented under fake names, weekend trips to Jeju Island where no one knew them, his apartment late at night when his family thought he was working. He'd told her she was different, special, that he'd never felt this way before. She'd believed him because she was 23 and in love and stupid. The pregnancy had been an accident, the kind that happens when you're too caught up in the moment to be careful, when you trust someone completely because they've made you feel like you're the only person in their world. She'd been terrified to tell him, but also secretly, foolishly hopeful. Maybe this would be the thing that made them real, that forced them out of the shadows. She'd told him in his car, parked outside a restaurant where they'd just had dinner. She'd watched his face cycle through shock, panic, and then something cold and calculating that she'd never seen before. "You'll need to take care of it," he'd said, hands tight on the steering wheel. "I'll pay for everything, of course. The best clinic. Take care of it." She needed him to say it clearly, needed to understand that this was really happening. "Amara, be realistic. My family is arranging meetings with appropriate women. The daughter of the Shin family, possibly the Parks. This is how things work in my world. You knew that. I knew I was temporary, you mean. I never promised you anything permanent." He'd looked at her then, and there was something almost like regret in his eyes, but not enough. Never enough. "You're young, brilliant. You have your whole life ahead of you. A child now would ruin everything. For you, you mean. For both of us." He'd reached for her hand, but she'd pulled away. "I care about you, Amara. That's why I want what's best for you." She'd gotten out of the car without another word, had gone home to her tiny apartment, and cried until there was nothing left. Then she'd started planning. She'd had enough savings for a plane ticket and 3 months of survival. Paris had seemed far enough away to start over, close enough to European fashion capitals that her degree might matter. She'd left without telling him, without telling anyone. Just disappeared like she'd never existed. Let him think she'd done what he'd suggested. Let him move on with his perfect, arranged life. And she'd had Kai alone in a Paris hospital room, held him for the first time, and promised that she would never let anyone make her feel small again. Building a career in fashion while raising a toddler alone had been brutal. There were months she'd lived on rice and whatever sample sale items she could afford. She'd learned French through immersion and desperation, built a portfolio through unpaid internships and shameless networking, worked her way from assistant to assistant stylist to someone the industry actually respected. And now Seoul's elite paid her premium rates to make them look flawless, never knowing that the polished woman adjusting their hemlines had once been destroyed by one of their own. The return to Seoul had been calculated. She'd waited until she had enough reputation and money to feel safe, until Kai was old enough for school, until she could come back with armor instead of hope. The job with Yuri had fallen into her lap through a friend of a friend, but when she'd seen Ji-hoon's name on the client file, she'd known the universe was offering her something. Not closure. Closure was for people who wanted to heal. This was something sharper, more satisfying. This was the chance to stand in front of the man who discarded her and show him exactly what he'd thrown away. And maybe, just maybe, to make him feel a fraction of the fear she'd felt alone and pregnant in a foreign country. The week after the bridal suite encounter passed in a haze of strategic planning. Amara accepted every job Yuri offered, positioned herself as indispensable, made herself impossible to dismiss without causing problems. The wedding was in 3 months. She had exactly that long to decide how much damage she wanted to do. Kai noticed her distraction. "You're thinking loud again, Mama." They were eating dinner in their apartment, a modest but comfortable space in Gangnam that her career could now afford. Kai had his homework spread across the table, math problems she'd help him with after they ate. "Sorry, baby. Work stuff." The sad man from the hotel? Too perceptive. She'd need to be more careful. What makes you think that? He shrugged, shoveling rice into his mouth. You get a special face when you think about him. Like you ate something that tasted bad, but you have to finish it anyway. She laughed despite herself. That's very specific. I'm very smart. He grinned at her, tomato sauce on his chin. Did he know me when I was a baby? The question landed like a punch. She'd known this conversation would come eventually, had prepared responses, but nothing felt adequate in the moment. No, sweetheart. He didn't. Why not? Because I decided it was better if we left before you were born. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions to protect the people they love. Did you love him? I thought I did. But I loved you more. Do you understand the difference? Kai considered this seriously. Like how I love video games, but I love you more, so I do my homework first. Exactly like that. He seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to his dinner. But she saw the wheels turning in his head, the way he was filing away information for later. Her brilliant, observant boy who missed nothing. That night, after Kai was asleep, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She knew who it was before she opened it. We need to talk. Please. She stared at the message for a long moment, then blocked the number. If Ji-hoon wanted to talk, he could do it at the next fitting while his fiancée watched. No more private conversations, no more hotel rooms, no more spaces where he held power over her. Thursday arrived with rain that turned Seoul streets into mirrors reflecting neon. Amara brought Seo-yeon with her to the fitting, her assistant and closest friend who knew most of the history. Seo-yeon was sharp-tongued and loyal, the kind of person who would help hide a body without asking questions. Are you sure about this? Seo-yeon asked as they navigated traffic. You could just finish the job and walk away. No drama. Where's the satisfaction in that? I'm just saying, sometimes revenge is less satisfying than we hope. Sometimes it just makes us tired. Amara adjusted her rearview mirror, checking her makeup one last time. I'm already tired. I've been tired for 7 years. At least this way I get to choose who else gets exhausted. The fitting was at the Kong family estate, because of course it was. The house sprawled across a hillside in Hanam-dong, all glass and steel and old money pretending to be modern. Amara had been here once before, 7 years ago, sneaking in late at night through a side entrance like a shameful secret. Today she walked through the front door with her head high and her kid in hand. Yuri greeted them in the main room, which had been converted into a temporary fitting area. A small army of vendors bustled around setting up chairs, arranging flowers, discussing lighting for the photographer who would document every moment. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a production, a merger announcement, a carefully staged display of power. And somewhere in this house was Ji-hoon, probably in his study, trying to figure out what to do about the complication that had walked back into his life wearing Louboutins. She didn't have to wait long. He appeared within 15 minutes, business casual instead of a suit, hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. The kind of disheveled that looked intentional but wasn't. His eyes found her immediately, and this time there was no confusion, just intensity that made her skin feel too tight. Ms. Chun, he said formally, could I speak with you privately about the boutonniere options? Yuri waved a hand dismissively. Take her to the study. I need to approve these flower arrangements anyway. Amara met Seo-yeon's eyes, received a subtle nod of support, and followed Ji-hoon down a hallway lined with family portraits. Generations of Kangs stared down at them, all strong jawlines and expensive clothes, a genetic legacy that now included a 7-year-old boy who would never appear in these frames. The study was exactly as she remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with books he'd probably never read. He closed the door but didn't move closer, just stood there looking at her like he was seeing a ghost. His name is Kai, she said before he could speak. He likes dinosaurs and mathematics. He's reading at a 4th grade level and he wants to be an architect. He asks questions constantly, and he has your smile when he's genuinely happy, which isn't as often as I'd like because single parenthood in a foreign country is difficult. If this story has you hooked, drop a comment below telling me what you think Amara should do next. And don't forget to like this video because what comes next is going to get intense. Ji-hoon's composure cracked visibly. Why didn't you tell me? The audacity of the question nearly made her laugh. You told me to get rid of it. Those were your exact words. Get rid of it. What part of that suggested you wanted updates? I was in shock. I said things I didn't mean. No, you said exactly what you meant. I was temporary, remember? The daughter of a secretary from California, mixed race, no family connections. Not suitable for someone like you. I never said that. You didn't have to. Your family would have said it for you. She moved to the window, looking out at grounds that probably cost more to maintain than she'd earned in her first 3 years abroad. Let me guess what would have happened if I'd told you I was keeping the baby. Your family would have offered money to go away quietly. When that didn't work, they would have threatened my work visa, my reputation, made sure I could never work in Seoul again. And you would have stood by and let them do it because challenging your family would have been inconvenient. His silence was confirmation enough. So I saved us both the trouble, she continued. I left. I had him alone, and I built a life. A good life. And you got to marry your appropriate bride and continue the dynasty. Everyone wins. Except I have a son I never knew about. Correction. You have a biological connection to a child you never wanted. Those aren't the same thing. He flinched. That's not fair. Fair. She turned to face him, and 7 years of contained rage colored her voice. You want to talk about fair? I gave birth alone in a Paris hospital room at 3 in the morning because I couldn't afford a doula. I worked 3 jobs for the first year of his life. I missed his first steps because I was at a fashion show trying to make rent. I've been both mother and father to him because you decided he wasn't convenient for your life plan. So don't talk to me about fair. I want to know him. The words came out desperate. Please. I want to be part of his life. Why? Guilt? Sudden attack of paternal instinct? Or is it because you've realized he's your only child and you're about to marry someone your family picked for alliances rather than love? He stepped closer. Because he's my son. That matters. It mattered 7 years ago too. You just decided other things mattered more. I was 26 and terrified. My father had just had his first heart attack. The company was in transition. I had responsibilities I couldn't abandon. And I was 23 and pregnant, and I had responsibilities you forced me to handle alone. She held his gaze steadily. The difference is, I rose to meet mine. What do you want from me, Amara? The question hung between them, heavy with possibilities. What did she want? An apology wouldn't fix 7 years. Money wouldn't erase the nights she'd cried from exhaustion. Recognition wouldn't change the fact that Kai had grown up without a father because his mother's love wasn't enough to keep someone around. Nothing, she said finally. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know that he exists. That your choice to abandon us had consequences. That somewhere in this city is a little boy who has your eyes and your brain and absolutely none of your cowardice. And you don't get to claim him now that it's convenient. He deserves to know his father. He deserves a father who wanted him. You're just a man with matching DNA. She picked up her kit from where she'd set it down. The fitting is probably done. We should go back. Amara, please. Ms. Chen, she corrected. And this conversation is over. She walked out before he could respond, before she could see whether her words had actually wounded him or just bounced off the armor rich men built around their feelings. Seo-yun took one look at her face and silently handed her a bottle of water. Yuri was examining herself in the mirror, turning to catch every angle. There you are. I need your opinion on the veil length. Too dramatic or not dramatic enough? Amara slipped back into professional mode, like putting on a mask. Let's try it with the cathedral length. It'll photograph beautifully going down the aisle. She spent the next hour adjusting fabric and offering opinions while her mind spun through calculations. Ji-hoon hovered at the edges of the room, ostensibly overseeing arrangements, but really just watching her. She could feel his attention like heat, uncomfortable and inescapable. Yuri noticed too. She was too intelligent not to. Darling, you're hovering, Yuri said lightly, but there was an edge beneath the sweetness. Don't you have calls to make? Important business that can't wait? Nothing more important than this, he said, but he left anyway, properly chastised. Yuri waited until his footsteps faded before turning to Amara with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You'll have to excuse him. He's been distracted lately. Work stress, I imagine. Or possibly cold feet, though I've assured him those are completely normal. I'm sure the pressure is considerable, Amara replied neutrally. These events require enormous coordination, more than most people realize. Yuri tilted her head, studying Amara with the same intensity she probably used when evaluating stock portfolios. You know, you look familiar to me. Have we met before? Perhaps at another event. I don't think so. I've only recently returned to Seoul after several years abroad. Paris, wasn't it? You mentioned training at Parsons. Yes. Lovely city. I have friends there. The Du Bois family, perhaps you know them? They're very involved in the fashion scene. It was a test, obviously. Checking if Amara's credentials were real or fabricated. I know of them. We didn't move in the same circles. No, I suppose not. Yuri's smile sharpened. You must have worked very hard to get where you are. Starting from scratch in a foreign country, building a reputation. That takes determination. It does. And a child, I noticed. From the hotel. Raising a child alone while building a career. Even more impressive. Seo Yun's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her fabric scissors. They were treading into dangerous territory now, and Yuri knew it. This was a woman who had been trained since childhood to read power dynamics and exploit weaknesses. I manage, Amara said simply. I'm sure you do. Though I imagine there are times you wish things had gone differently, that you'd made different choices. Regret is a luxury I can't afford. I have a son who depends on me. Of course. Yuri turned back to the mirror, but her eyes tracked Amara's reflection. Children do complicate things. They create connections, obligations. They tie people together in ways that can't be easily broken. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Yuri suspected something, even if she didn't have all the pieces yet. And she was the type of woman who, once suspicious, would dig until she found answers. The fitting ended with professional pleasantries and scheduling of the next appointment. Amara packed her kit with practiced efficiency while Seo Yun ran interference, chatting with Yuri about fabric suppliers and alterations. They made it to the car before either of them spoke. She knows something, Seo Yun said immediately. She suspects something. There's a difference. Not for long. That woman is dangerous. So am I. Amara started the car, pulling away from the estate with relief. I didn't survive this long by being weak. What are you going to do? My job. What else can I do? But that night, after Kai was asleep, she found herself looking through old photos on her phone. Pictures from 7 years ago, when she'd been stupid and in love. Ji-hoon smiling at her over coffee, his arm around her shoulders on Jeju Island, asleep in his apartment with morning light, making him look almost innocent. She'd deleted most of them when she left Seoul, but a few remained. Evidence of a person she'd been, a relationship she'd believed in. Looking at them now felt like reading someone else's diary, the emotions distant and slightly embarrassing. Her phone buzzed with a message from a new, unknown number. Ji-hoon again, persistent. I hired a lawyer. I want to do this properly. Support, custody arrangements, whatever you need. She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. He doesn't need your money. He needs stability. Your life isn't stable. Neither is yours. You're raising him alone while building a career. Let me help. Help would have been useful 7 years ago. Now it's just guilt. Maybe. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't benefit from it. She hated that he had a point. Hated that despite everything, despite the abandonment and the pain, he was Kai's father and Kai deserved better than the scraps she could provide alone. But she also knew that letting Ji-hoon into their lives would open doors she'd fought hard to keep closed. I'll think about it. She blocked the new number too. If he wanted to talk, he could do it face to face, where she could see him coming. The next 2 weeks fell into an uneasy rhythm. More fittings, more vendor meetings, more moments of forced proximity with Ji-hoon, while Yuri watched them both with increasingly sharp attention. Amara brought Kai to one meeting by necessity when his school had an unexpected closure, and watching Ji-hoon try not to stare at his own child while pretending to review flower arrangements would have been funny if it weren't so painful. Kai, oblivious to the undercurrents, was fascinated by the estate. Mama, look at how tall those ceilings are. And the windows are perfectly proportioned. This is really good architecture. Ji-hoon's face when he heard his son's observations was something Amara would remember forever. Pride and loss mixed together. The realization of everything he'd missed. Yuri knelt down to Kai's level with a practiced smile. You like architecture? How sophisticated for someone your age. I'm 7, Kai said seriously. That's old enough to know what I like. Mama says if you know what you like, you should learn everything about it. Your mama is very wise. Yuri glanced at Amara. He has a very distinctive look. Those eyes, that bone structure. He'll be quite handsome when he grows up. He must get that from his father. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Seo Yun coughed suddenly. Ji-hoon's coffee cup clattered against its saucer, and Amara felt her heartbeat in her throat. From my side of the family, she said evenly. Strong genes. Clearly. Yuri stood, smile never wavering. Though I find genetics fascinating. The things that get passed down, the unexpected connections they reveal. Oh, she definitely knew something. The question was how much and what she planned to do with the information. The appointment ended earlier than scheduled. Yuri claimed a sudden headache, though her eyes were sharp and calculating as she watched them leave. Amara held Kai's hand tightly all the way to the car, feeling like they'd barely escaped something dangerous. Ms. Park was nice, Kai said, buckling himself in. But I think she was pretending. Pretending what? To like me. Adults do that sometimes. They smile, but their eyes don't match. 7 years old, and already reading people better than most adults. She'd raised him to be observant for safety, but sometimes his perceptiveness felt like a curse. What made you think that? The way she looked at you after I talked about architecture. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Are we the puzzle, Mama? She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Yes, baby. I think we might be. Is that bad? I don't know yet. That night, the first article appeared online. Nothing major, just a small mention in a society column that covered Seoul's elite. But the wording was specific enough to be deliberate. Rumors circulate about Kong Park wedding preparations. Sources close to the couple suggest unexpected complications involving past relationships. More details as they emerge. Amara's phone exploded with messages. Friends asking if she'd seen it, colleagues wondering if it would affect the job, Seo-yeon calling to say they needed to talk immediately. She ignored them all and called a lawyer instead. If Yuri was going to weaponize information, Amara needed to be prepared. For herself, but more importantly for Kai. Because whatever happened next, her son would not become collateral damage in someone else's war. The lawyer, a woman named Grace Kim who specialized in family law and high-profile cases, listened to the entire story without interruption. When Amara finished, Grace leaned back in her chair and whistled low. You're either very brave or very reckless to take this job. Can't I be both? Oh, you definitely are both. Grace pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we're dealing with. Legally, since he's not on the birth certificate and you've been the sole caregiver, you have full custody. He would need to petition for paternity testing, then for visitation rights. Given his family's resources, he could make that process long and expensive. But he'd win eventually. Probably. Family courts favor parental involvement when the parent is stable and willing. And the Kong family certainly has the resources to present him as stable. What about my rights? You have plenty. 7 years of sole custody carries weight. You can negotiate terms, require him to take parenting classes, set restrictions. But you can't realistically keep him out of the child's life if he genuinely wants in. And if he's only doing this because I've backed him into a corner, then that's something the court would consider. Motivation matters. But proving his intentions are questionable when he has money for the best lawyers will be difficult. Amara left the consultation feeling simultaneously prepared and terrified. She had options, but all of them involved exposure. All of them involved Kai being caught in the middle of adult complications he shouldn't have to understand yet. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed Ji-hoon waiting outside her apartment building. He stood next to an expensive car she didn't recognize, hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. I don't want to fight, he said before she could tell him to leave. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. You've had several opportunities to talk. You chose to text instead. Because you kept blocking my numbers. Amara, please. 5 minutes. She glanced up at her apartment window. Kai was with Seo-yeon for the evening, which meant she could have this conversation without him overhearing. 5 minutes. And not here. There's a coffee shop around the corner. The shop was nearly empty at this hour, just a few students studying in corners and a barista who looked too tired to care about whatever drama walked through the door. They sat at a table by the window, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Just two people who used to know each other trying to figure out what they were now. Yuri knows, Ji-hoon said finally. Or she suspects. She hired an investigator. Of course she did. I tried to call it off, but she's already received a preliminary report. Amara, she knows you were in Seoul 7 years ago. She knows you worked for my family's company. She's connecting the dots. Let her. The truth isn't shameful to me. Only to you. He flinched. That's not fair. You keep saying that like fairness is something I'm obligated to provide you. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to protect yourself. There's a difference. She leaned forward, voice low and sharp. If you wanted to protect me, you would have done it 7 years ago. You would have stood up to your family, or at the very least, checked that I was okay after you told me to get rid of my pregnancy. But you didn't. You let me disappear because it was convenient. I tried to find you. After a few months, I realized you hadn't done what I suggested. I tried to track you down. How hard did you try? His silence answered the question. Right. Hard enough to ease your conscience, but not hard enough to actually find me. She stood up. Your 5 minutes are up. If Yuri wants to expose us, let her. I've survived worse than gossip. Wait. He grabbed her wrist, then immediately released it when he saw her expression. She's not going to stop at gossip. She's going to destroy you professionally. Make sure no one in Seoul will work with you again. Amara, you don't understand how vindictive she can be. And whose fault is that? You chose to marry someone vindictive. You chose to build your perfect life on foundations that couldn't handle truth. Those are your problems, Ji-hoon. Mine is keeping my son safe from the fallout of your choices. Our son. No. Mine. You contributed genetic material. I did everything else. She left him sitting there and walked home through Seoul's bright streets, past couples holding hands and families heading to dinner. Normal people with normal problems. She'd wanted that once, had believed Ji-hoon when he made her feel like they could build something real together. But wanting something didn't make it true, and belief didn't protect you from abandonment. Her phone buzzed with a message from Seo-yeon. Kai's asleep. Told him you were working late. He asked about the sad man again. We need to talk about how much he's picking up. They did. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to get home, check on her sleeping son, and prepare for whatever came next. What came next arrived faster than expected. The full article dropped the next morning, not in a society column, but in one of Seoul's major financial papers. Apparently, someone had decided this was newsworthy of serious journalism. Kong Pharmaceutical heir's secret past surfaces ahead of high-profile wedding. Sources confirm Ji-hoon Kong had a relationship with a former employee 7 years ago, shortly before she left the country. The woman, now a fashion stylist working on the Kong Park wedding, has a 7-year-old son. Paternity has not been confirmed, but close observers note striking family resemblance. Neither the Kong family nor Park Industries have commented. The article was careful, legally vague, but the implication was crystal clear. And because it appeared in a respected financial paper rather than a gossip rag, it carried weight. By noon, it had been picked up by 3 other outlets. By evening, it was trending on social media. Amara's phone became unusable from the volume of calls and messages. Clients canceling, colleagues asking for statements, journalists requesting interviews. She turned it off and focused on the only thing that mattered, picking up Kai from school before the reporters figured out which one he attended. She arrived to find Seo-yeon already there, standing guard at the gate with the fierce protectiveness of someone who had appointed themselves aunt regardless of blood relation. He's still in class. I told them you were running late, but no one suspicious has shown up yet. Thank you. Amara's hands shook slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. This is worse than I thought it would be. You thought it would be private revenge. A secret burn. But secrets don't stay secret when powerful people get involved. I know that now. Kai emerged from the building with his backpack and a drawing he'd made, oblivious to the fact that his entire life was about to change. He climbed into the car chattering about his science project, and Amara led him, grateful for the normalcy of his voice. They were halfway home when her phone rang from a number she recognized. Yuri. Amara answered on speaker. Ms. Park. Ms. Chun. I think we need to have a conversation. Woman to woman, without the men making decisions for us. I agree. There's a tea house in Insadong. Suyin, can you meet me in an hour? It was a test of nerve. Refusing would look like cowardice. Accepting meant walking into potential ambush. I'll be there. She dropped Kai with Seo-yeon despite his protests, changed into armor disguised as a business suit, and headed to Insadong. The tea house was traditional, expensive, the kind of place where Seoul's elite women met to discuss matters they didn't want overheard. Private rooms, discreet staff, excellent security. Yuri was already there, wearing Chanel and a smile that could cut glass. She'd chosen a room overlooking a garden, beautiful and completely private. As soon as Amara sat down, Yuri dismissed the staff and poured tea herself. You're probably wondering why I wanted to meet. I have theories. I'm sure you do. But let me be direct, because I respect you too much to play games. Yuri set down the teapot with precise control. You came back to Seoul to hurt him. The job with me was never about fashion. It was about proximity. About making him see what he threw away. There was no point denying it. Yes. I appreciate the honesty. Yuri sipped her tea, composed as a painting. Here's what I know. 7 years ago, Ji-hoon had a relationship with his secretary. She left suddenly. No one knew why. His family was relieved because she was inappropriate for someone of his status. A year later, arrangements began for our engagement. Our families have been planning this union since we were children. It makes sense financially, socially, politically. Then why are you marrying him if it's just business? Because that's how my world works. Love is optional. Compatibility is not. Yuri met her eyes directly. I don't love him. He doesn't love me. But we respect each other. We want similar things, and together we'll build an empire. That's more reliable than passion. Sounds lonely, says the woman raising a child alone. The words weren't cruel, just factual. We're both practical, Miss Chun. We've both made choices based on survival rather than sentiment. The difference is, I've never pretended otherwise. What do you want from me? The truth. Is that child Ji-hoon's son? Amara held her gaze, weighing options. The truth would give Yuri ammunition. Lies would be exposed eventually. Yes. Yuri didn't react visibly, but something shifted in her posture. A decision being made. Did you tell him you were pregnant before you left? Yes. He told me to get rid of it. I refused and left instead. And you never contacted him again? No. Why come back now? Because I built a life good enough that he couldn't hurt me anymore. And I wanted him to know what he'd missed. Yuri laughed, surprising them both. I respect that. Truly. Most women in your position would have tried to extract money or force acknowledgement. You just wanted him to suffer. That's honest. I'm not trying to ruin your wedding. Yes, you are. Maybe not deliberately, but your presence does it anyway. Yuri refilled both their cups. Here's my situation. This wedding represents a merger worth billions. It secures my family's position and his. Canceling it would create chaos, financial repercussions, social embarrassment. I don't want that. Then marry him. I'm not stopping you. But the scandal is. The articles, the speculation. My family is already asking questions. His family is furious. Investors are nervous. This needs to be resolved before it destroys everything we've built. What are you proposing? Yuri pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. A settlement. Generous child support, education trust, housing allowance. Enough to ensure your son has everything he needs. In exchange, you sign an NDA. No interviews, no public acknowledgement, no claims on the Kong family legacy. You raise your son quietly. We continue our lives. Everyone wins. Amara opened the folder. The numbers were staggering. Enough money to ensure Kai would never want for anything. The best schools, opportunities, security. Everything she'd struggled to provide alone, handed to her on a contract. And what does Ji-hoon get? To marry me without complications. To have a son he can visit privately, support financially, but not claim publicly. To maintain the image his family requires. So Kai stays a secret. A shameful thing hidden away. Or he stays protected. Away from media scrutiny, public pressure, expectations he didn't ask for. Amara, you know what it's like to be the inappropriate connection in a powerful family. Do you really want that for your son? The question hit harder than any threat could have. Because Yuri was right. Kai being acknowledged would make him a target. Questions about legitimacy, his mother's background, whether he deserved the Kong name. He'd spend his life being measured against standards designed to exclude him. I need to think about it. Of course. You have 48 hours. After that, I'll take other measures to protect what's mine. Meaning I'll make sure you can't work in Seoul. I'll ensure every client knows you're unreliable, unprofessional. I'll destroy the career you built. And I'll do it with regret because I genuinely respect what you've accomplished. But I will protect my interests. Amara stood, leaving the contract on the table. I'll call you with my decision. She made it to her car before her hands started shaking. The offer was everything she'd fought for, handed to her with conditions that would make Kai forever secondary. Protected but hidden. Supported but unacknowledged. It was the same thing Ji-hoon had offered 7 years ago, just with better terms and a longer contract. Her phone rang. Ji-hoon, did you meet with her? Yes. Don't take the offer. Please. I want to do this right. Acknowledge him properly. Be part of his life publicly. Since when? Since I saw him. Since I realized what I'd thrown away. Amara, I know I don't deserve another chance, but he deserves a father. He deserves a father who wanted him from the beginning. You're just trying to ease your guilt. Maybe. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm his father and I want to try. Trying would mean walking away from Yuri. Calling off the wedding. Facing your family's disappointment. Risking your position. Are you willing to do that? The pause told her everything. It's complicated. It's only complicated when you care more about your comfort than your child. She hung up. That night, Kai found her sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. He climbed into her lap despite being almost too big for it now, resting his head against her shoulder. Are we in trouble, Mama? Not trouble. Just complications. Because of the sad man? Yes. Does he want to take me away? The fear in his voice broke her heart. No, baby. No one is taking you away from me. Ever. Promise. I promise. But as she held him, she wondered if that was a promise she could keep. Because if she rejected the settlement and fought for public acknowledgement, she'd be dragging Kai into a legal battle between powerful families. And if she accepted the money and stayed silent, she'd be teaching him that shame was the price of security. Neither option felt like winning. Seo Yun arrived early the next morning with coffee and brutal honesty. You need to make a decision. I know. What does your lawyer say? That I have rights, but they'll be expensive to enforce. That Kai's wishes will matter as he gets older, but right now I speak for him. That money doesn't equal love, but it does equal opportunity. Helpful? Not really. Amara cupped her hands around the coffee, grateful for its warmth. I keep thinking about what kind of example I'm setting. If I take the money and stay quiet, I'm telling Kai that we're shameful, that his existence is something to hide. But if I fight publicly, I'm putting him in the spotlight when he never asked for that attention. What does he want? He's 7. He wants ice cream, and to not have adults make him anxious. Smart kid. Amara's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A photo this time. Kai leaving school, taken yesterday. The message was simple. Cute kid. Would be a shame if paparazzi found out which school he attends. Her blood turned to ice. They're threatening him. Seo Yun grabbed the phone, face darkening as she read. That's from a private number. Probably routed through a service to hide the sender. Yuri. Or someone working for her. Or the Kong family. Does it matter? It didn't. The message was clear. Sign the NDA or Kai becomes a media circus. Let him be hidden or let him be hunted. Those were the options they were offering. Rage burned through Amara's chest, hot and clarifying. She'd spent 7 years building strength, creating safety, making sure her son would never feel small. And now these people, these powerful families who thought money gave them the right to control lives, were threatening the one thing she'd die to protect. Call Grace, she said, voice steady despite the fury. Tell her I'm rejecting the settlement. And I want to hold a press conference. Amara, they want to threaten my child? Then they're going to learn exactly what happens when you corner a mother with nothing left to lose. If you're still watching this, hit that subscribe button because you need to see what Amara does next. This woman is about to burn down Seoul's elite, and she's got the receipts to do it. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning, giving Amara 3 days to prepare. Grace advised against it, strongly. You're playing their game now. They have more resources, better lawyers, control over media narratives. I don't care. They threatened my son, which you can't prove. That message could have come from anyone. Could have been a random stalker. Making accusations you can't substantiate will only hurt your credibility. Then I won't mention the threat. I'll just tell the truth. Grace sighed the sigh of a lawyer who knew she was being ignored. The truth is messy. It makes you look like a scorned woman seeking revenge. Because that's exactly what I am. Why pretend otherwise? Because pretending gets you better outcomes. Amara, I'm serious. If you do this, you're declaring war on 2 of Seoul's most powerful families. They will retaliate. They will make your life difficult. And Kai will be caught in the middle. He's already in the middle. They made sure of that when they threatened him. But that night, lying in bed listening to Kai sleep in the next room, doubt crept in. Was she doing this for him or for herself? Was this about protecting her son or punishing the man who'd hurt her? The line between the two had blurred somewhere along the way. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ji-hoon. Please don't do the press conference. Let me handle this. I'll tell my family, break the engagement, do this properly. Just give me time. She typed back. You've had 7 years. How much more time do you need? I'm scared of their reaction, of losing everything, of failing him the way I failed you. For a moment, she softened. Because fear was honest at least. Fear was more real than any of the calculated moves and power plays. But fear didn't excuse action. Being scared is human. Letting fear make your choices for you is cowardice. Decide what kind of man you want to be. Then be that. I can't make that choice for you. She turned off her phone and tried to sleep. The press conference was held at a boutique hotel, neutral ground that didn't favor either family. Grace had arranged everything, hired security, vetted the journalists who would attend. Amara wore simple black, no jewelry, her hair pulled back. She looked like exactly what she was, a working mother who had been pushed into a corner. Kai was with Seo-yun at a secure location. The last thing Amara had told him was that she loved him and that sometimes doing the right thing was scary but necessary. He'd hugged her tight and whispered, "You're the bravest person I know, Mama." She held on to that as she walked into the conference room. The room was packed. Financial journalists, entertainment reporters, camera crews. Yuri sat in the back, perfectly composed, flanked by lawyers. The Kong family had sent a representative. And in the corner, looking like he might be sick, was Ji-hoon. Grace gave opening remarks, establishing the facts. Yes, Amara had worked for Kong Pharmaceuticals 7 years ago. Yes, she had a 7-year-old son. Yes, Ji-hoon Kong was the father, a fact he'd acknowledged privately. The question was what came next. Then it was Amara's turn. She stood at the podium and looked at the cameras, knowing that whatever she said would follow Kai for the rest of his life. Knowing that this moment would define how the world saw them. My name is Amara Chen. 7 years ago, I was young, in love, and stupid enough to believe that those things mattered more than family legacy or business arrangements. When I discovered I was pregnant, I told the father. He asked me to terminate the pregnancy. I refused and left the country instead. She paused, letting that sink in. Cameras flashed. Someone in the audience gasped. I raised my son alone. No support, no contact, no acknowledgement. I built a career while being both mother and father. I came back to Seoul because I'd finally built a life good enough that the past couldn't hurt me anymore. Or so I thought. She pulled out her phone, displayed the photo of Kai that had been sent to her. Yesterday, someone sent me this. A threat disguised as observation. A reminder that my son could become a target if I didn't stay quiet. So I'm here today to remove that leverage. You want to know about my son? Here's what you need to know. His name is Kai. He's brilliant, kind, curious, and the best thing I've ever done. He's 7 years old, and he deserves better than to be anyone's secret or leverage or shame. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. I'm not here to destroy anyone's wedding or business deal. I'm here because powerful people try to threaten my child, and I will not accept that. So yes, Ji-hoon Kong is Kai's biological father. Yes, he abandoned us. Yes, he's now trying to do better, but only because he got caught. And yes, I'm angry. But my anger isn't your story to sell. My son's life isn't entertainment. He's a child who deserves privacy and peace. She looked directly at Ji-hoon. If you want to be his father, then be his father. Not when it's convenient. Not when you've calculated the optics. Be present. Be consistent. Be someone he can trust. That's the only thing that matters. Not money, not settlements, not NDAs. Just show up. She stepped away from the podium. Grace tried to manage questions, but Amara was done. She walked out of the conference room with her head high, past Yuri's frozen expression, past Ji-hoon's devastated face, past all the cameras trying to capture her reaction. She made it to her car before the tears came. Seo-yun was waiting with Kai at the apartment. Her son ran to her immediately, wrapping his arms around her waist. Did you do it, Mama? Did you tell them? I told them. Are we going to be okay? She knelt down, looking into eyes that were hers and Ji-hoon's mixed together into something entirely new. We're going to be fine. Better than fine. Because we have each other, and that's all that really matters. What about the sad man? I don't know yet, baby. We'll have to wait and see what he decides. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The Kong family released a statement expressing disappointment in their son's past behavior, but supporting his intention to take responsibility. Park Industries announced that the wedding would be postponed pending private family discussions. Media outlets dissected every word of Amara's statement, half painting her as a victim and half as an opportunist. Her phone exploded with interview requests, book deal offers, people wanting her story. She ignored all of it and focused on the only thing that mattered, keeping Kai's life as normal as possible while the world spun around them. 3 days after the press conference, Ji-hoon showed up at her door, not with lawyers or contracts, just himself, looking exhausted and uncertain. "Can I see him?" "Why?" "Because he's my son. Because you were right. I need to decide what kind of man I want to be." "And what did you decide?" "That I've been a coward long enough." He looked past her into the apartment. "I broke the engagement. Told my family that I was done letting them control my life. It's going to cost me my position in the company, probably my inheritance. But I don't care anymore. I just want to know my son." Amara studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But his exhaustion looked genuine. His fear looked real. Maybe people could change. Or maybe they just finally hit bottom hard enough that up was the only direction left. "He's doing homework. And Ji-hoon, if you hurt him, if you disappear again, if you let him down, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you regret it." "Understood. Understood." She let him in. Kai looked up from his math problems, saw Ji-hoon, and his expression went carefully neutral. The wariness of a child who'd learned that adults were complicated and often disappointing. "Hi," Ji-hoon said, and his voice shook slightly. I don't know what your mom told you about me. She said you're my biological father, and that you made choices that hurt her, and that adults are complicated." Kai set down his pencil. "Are you here to make more bad choices?" "I hope not. I'm here to try to make better ones." "Okay." Kai considered this. "Do you like dinosaurs?" The question clearly caught Ji-hoon off guard. I don't know much about them." "That's okay. I can teach you. Mama says if you want to know someone, you should learn about what they love." Ji-hoon's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "I'd like that. Very much." Amara watched from the kitchen as her son explained the difference between various prehistoric periods to a man who looked like he'd been handed something precious and fragile and was terrified of dropping it. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance yet. But it was a beginning. Later, after Kai was in bed and Ji-hoon was preparing to leave, he stopped at the door. "Thank you for letting me try. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for him. He deserves the chance to know his father, even if his father doesn't deserve him. I know I don't. I know I have years of showing up before I earn anything close to trust. But Amara, I'm going to try. Every day, whatever it takes." Words are easy, Ji-hoon. Consistency is hard. Prove it through action. He nodded and left, and she closed the door on another chapter of a story that was still being written. The next months were strange and uncomfortable, building new patterns from the wreckage of old ones. Ji-hoon visited twice a week, always at scheduled times, always bringing something Kai had mentioned wanting to learn about. Sometimes they went to museums or parks. Sometimes they just sat in the apartment while Kai did homework and Ji-hoon watched like he was memorizing every detail. Amara kept her distance, neither encouraging nor discouraging, letting Kai set the pace. Her son was cautious, taking his time deciding what this new person meant in his life. But slowly, carefully, something like trust began to form. Yuri, surprisingly, reached out, not with threats or lawyers, but with an unexpected olive branch. They met for coffee in a quiet cafe far from cameras. "I underestimated you," Yuri said without preamble. "I thought you were after money or status. I didn't realize you were just protecting your child. Would it have changed anything if you had? Probably not. I still would have tried to manage the situation. But maybe I would have done it differently." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I called off the engagement permanently, by the way. Not because of the scandal. Because I realized I'd rather be alone than build a life with someone who's in love with someone else. He's not in love with me. Maybe not the you that exists now. But the memory of what you were together, what you could have been, that haunts him. And I don't want to spend my life competing with a ghost. I'm sorry. Don't be. You did me a favor. I found out before it was too late." Yuri smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I respect you, Amara. What you did took courage. Raising a child alone, building a career, standing up to people who could have destroyed you. That's real strength. Or real stubbornness. They're often the same thing. They parted as something not quite friends, but not enemies either. Just two women who'd survived the same storm and come out different on the other side." 6 months after the press conference, Amara received an offer from a major fashion house in Paris. Creative director position, significant salary, creative freedom. Everything she'd worked toward. And it would mean taking Kai away from Seoul just as he was starting to build a relationship with Ji-hoon. She sat Kai down and explained the opportunity. It's your life too, baby. You get a say in this decision. He thought about it seriously, the way he approached everything. Would I still get to see him? My father. Yes. He could visit. You could video call. It wouldn't be the same as having him nearby, but it would still be something. Do you want to go, Mama? I want what's best for you. That's not what I asked. She smiled at his perceptiveness. Yes. I want to go. Paris was where I became strong. It feels like home in a way Seoul never has. Then we should go. You taught me that home is people, not places. As long as we're together, we're home. So they went. The last conversation with Ji-hoon before they left was harder than she expected. I'm not trying to take him away from you, she said as they sat in her nearly empty apartment, boxes packed around them. But this is my career, my life. I can't put it on hold just to make your relationship easier. I know, and I'm not asking you to. He looked exhausted but more alive than she'd seen him in years. I'll visit. Every month if you'll let me. I'll show up. I meant what I said. Then prove it. Not just for the next few months, but for years. Be consistent. Be present. Be what he needs. I will be. He hesitated. Amara, I know I have no right to ask, but do you think you'll ever forgive me? She considered the question honestly. I don't know. Forgiveness feels like something I'd be doing for you, and I'm done doing things just to make you comfortable. But I'm not holding on to anger anymore either. It's too heavy to carry around. So maybe what I'm doing is just letting it go. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. They moved to Paris in early summer. Kai started school, made friends, adapted the way children do. Ji-hoon visited like he'd promised, consistent in a way he'd never been before. He sent texts between visits, photos, questions about Kai's interests. He learned about dinosaurs and architecture and how to be patient. Amara thrived in her new role, creating fashion that made statements, building collections that told stories. She dated occasionally, nothing serious, just testing what it felt like to trust someone new. Mostly she focused on Kai, on her work, on building the life she'd always imagined. 3 years after leaving Seoul, she received a package. Inside was a photo of Ji-hoon and Kai at a museum, both grinning at a dinosaur skeleton. On the back, Ji-hoon had written, "Thank you for giving me the chance to be his father. I'm still learning, but I'm trying. Always." She put the photo on her refrigerator, next to Kai's drawings and school achievements. Not because she'd forgiven everything, but because it represented something valuable. Proof that people could grow. That showing up mattered. That consistency was possible even after catastrophic failure. Kai came home from school that day full of stories about his science project. At 10 years old, he was brilliant and confident, secure in the knowledge that he was loved by multiple people in different ways. He talked to his father weekly, visited Seoul during school breaks, had built a relationship that was real even if it wasn't traditional. "Mama," he asked over dinner, "do you ever regret it? Coming back to Seoul? Everything that happened?" She thought about it carefully. "I regret the pain. I regret that we had to fight so hard for something that should have been simple. But I don't regret standing up for us. And I don't regret giving your father the chance to be better, even though he didn't deserve it. Because you deserved the chance to know him. I'm glad you did. He's getting better at dinosaurs." She laughed. High praise. Also, he's teaching me about business. How companies work, strategic thinking. It's actually interesting. Of course it is. You're brilliant. I know. You tell me every day. He grinned at her. But I like hearing it anyway. That night, after Kai was asleep, Amara stood at her window looking out at Paris lights and thought about the story she'd lived. It wasn't the one she'd planned. It wasn't neat or fair or wrapped up with simple resolution. But it was hers. Built from choices made in fear and anger and hope and love. Built from falling down and getting back up. Built from the fundamental truth that she was strong enough to survive anything. Her phone buzzed with a message from Seo-yeon, still in Seoul, still her closest friend despite the distance. "How's my favorite person? Tired but good. Kai's thriving. Work is challenging in the best way. How are things there? Dramatic as always. You should see the current scandal. Makes yours look tame. Glad I could set the bar. You said a lot more than that. You showed people that they don't have to accept being hidden. That was important." Amara thought about all the women who'd reached out after the press conference. Single mothers, people from inappropriate backgrounds, anyone who'd ever been told they didn't fit. Her story had resonated because it was specific but also universal. The struggle to be seen, to be valued, to refuse shame. I just did what I had to do. That's what courage is. Doing what you have to do even when it's terrifying. They talked for another hour, catching up on life, before saying goodbye. Amara poured herself tea and pulled out her sketchbook. She'd been designing a collection inspired by armor, beautiful pieces that also protected. Fashion that made statements. Clothes that said, I deserve space. I deserve respect. I deserve to be here. 7 years after leaving Seoul pregnant and alone, 5 years after returning for revenge, 3 years after the press conference that changed everything, Amara Chen sat in her Paris apartment and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that came from everything being perfect. The kind that came from knowing she'd fought for what mattered. She'd protected her son, built a career, forced acknowledgement from people who'd tried to keep her quiet. She'd survived, and more than that, she'd thrived. Love hadn't saved her. Choice had. The choice to leave when staying would have broken her. The choice to raise Kai even when it was impossibly hard. The choice to come back when she was strong enough. The choice to fight when they tried to silence her. The choice to let Ji-hoon try to be better, not for him, but for Kai. The choice to leave again when Paris called. Every choice had cost something. But every choice had also built something. Built her into someone who couldn't be dismissed or hidden or shamed into silence. Built Kai into someone secure and loved. Built a life that was messy and complicated and imperfect and absolutely, undeniably hers. And that, she thought as she sketched armor disguised as beauty, was its own kind of happy ending. Not the fairy tale kind. The real kind. The kind where you save yourself. Before we wrap up this story, if you enjoyed this journey with Amara, make sure to comment below about what moved you most. Was it her courage, her choices, or the way she refused to be silenced? And don't forget to like this video if you're Team Amara all the way. The years continued to unfold with the peculiar rhythm of lives lived across distances. Kai grew taller, sharper, more himself with each passing season. At 12, he informed Amara that he wanted to study architecture seriously, not just as a hobby. By 13, he was sketching building designs that made professionals take notice. By 14, he developed his father's strategic mind and his mother's creative vision, a combination that made him formidable in ways neither of them had anticipated. Ji-hoon kept his promise. Every month without fail, he arrived in Paris or flew Kai to Seoul during breaks. The visits evolved from awkward, supervised meetings to genuine companionship. They developed their own traditions, inside jokes, the shorthand that comes from consistent presence. He taught Kai about business, about navigating complex systems, about the weight of family legacy. Kai taught him about honesty, about showing up, about how trust was built in small moments rather than grand gestures. Amara watched this relationship develop with complicated feelings. Pride that her son had a father who was finally worthy of the title. Residual anger at the years Ji-hoon had missed because of his cowardice. Gratitude that Kai would never wonder if he was wanted. Grief for the younger version of herself who had loved Ji-hoon and believed they could build something together. But mostly, she felt relief. Because Kai was happy, secure, loved by multiple people in different ways. And that had always been the goal. Not revenge, though that had felt satisfying in the moment. Not vindication, though she'd earned that too. Just creating a life where her son could thrive without shame or limitation. On Kai's 15th birthday, Ji-hoon asked if they could all have dinner together. Not just him and Kai. All three of them. Amara's first instinct was to refuse. They'd maintained careful boundaries for years, orbiting around Kai, but rarely occupying the same space. But Kai asked her directly, with those eyes that saw too much, and she couldn't say no. The restaurant was quiet, elegant, the kind of place where conversations could be private despite the crowd. Kai sat between them, chattering about his latest design project, oblivious or pretending to be to the tension between the adults flanking him. Ji-hoon had aged well, silver threading through his hair now, lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. He'd left Kong Pharmaceuticals years ago after the scandal, started his own consulting firm focused on making healthcare more accessible. It was smaller, less prestigious, paid a fraction of what his family empire would have. But he talked about it with genuine passion, the way he used to talk about reform back when Amara had believed in him. "You've done well for yourself," she said when Kai excused himself to the restroom. The new venture. It's not what I thought my life would look like. But it's honest. That matters more than I realized. He studied her across the table. You've thrived. The collections, the awards. I see your work everywhere. I had good motivation. Spite. Survival. Spite was just a bonus. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the ones I gave you years ago when I was still trying to manage optics and minimize damage. A genuine apology for what I did to you. Ji-hoon. Please, let me say this. He set down his wine glass carefully. I was a coward. I loved you, I think, in whatever limited way I was capable of loving anyone back then. But I loved my comfort more. My family's approval, my position, the ease of doing what was expected. And when you got pregnant, I panicked. I saw my perfect plan life being disrupted, and I chose that plan over you. Over our child. That was unforgivable. Amara listened, waiting for the surge of anger or vindication. But all she felt was tired. You're right. It was unforgivable. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just acknowledging what I did. The harm I caused. The years Kai spent without a father because I was too weak to stand up to my family. The years you spent struggling alone because I abandoned you. I carry that weight every day. Good. You should. I do. And I want you to know that everything I've done since you came back to Seoul, every choice I've made, has been about trying to be worthy of him. Not to earn your forgiveness or to ease my guilt. Just to be the father he deserves, even though I started years too late. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen before. Genuine remorse. Not the performative kind meant to manipulate. The deep, uncomfortable kind that comes from truly reckoning with your failures. You have been, she admitted quietly. Worthy of him, I mean. Consistent. Present. You've shown up in ways I didn't think you were capable of. That matters. It's the bare minimum. Yes, but you're doing it. A lot of men wouldn't. Kai returned, sliding back into his seat with the easy confidence of a teenager who'd grown up knowing he was loved. What did I miss? Adult conversation, Amara said lightly. Very boring. So secrets. Not secrets. Just complicated things that aren't your burden to carry. He rolled his eyes with good humor. I'm 15. Everything adults do is complicated. But okay. They finished dinner talking about Kai's upcoming school project, his interest in sustainable architecture, his plans for university. He wanted to apply to programs in both Paris and Seoul, keep his options open, build bridges between the two cities that had shaped him. Later, walking through Paris streets lit by lamps that turned everything golden, Amara found herself walking slightly behind Kai and Ji-hoon. Watching her son gesture enthusiastically while explaining something about Gothic architecture, watching his father listen with complete attention. Two people who looked alike, connected by genetics and choice both, building something real from the wreckage of what could have been. Her phone buzzed with a message from Seo-yeon. A photo of the latest Seoul Society magazine. The headline read, "Where are they now? The scandal that changed everything." There was a photo of Amara from a recent fashion show, looking powerful and untouchable. They're still talking about it, Seo-yeon's message read. 5 years later, and you're still the woman who said no to being silent. Amara smiled and put her phone away. Let them talk. Let her story be the one that gave other women courage. Let the scandal be remembered not for the drama, but for the precedent. That you could refuse shame. That you could demand acknowledgement. That you could protect your child and build your career and thrive despite powerful people trying to keep you small. Mama, Kai called back to her. Are you listening? We're talking about Seoul versus Paris for university. She caught up to them, linking her arm through Kai's. I'm listening. Tell me again. As they walked through the city that had saved her, flanked by the son she'd raised alone and the man who'd finally learned to show up, Amara thought about the strange paths lives take. The unexpected ways people grow. The complicated truth that healing isn't linear and forgiveness isn't required for peace. She'd come back to Seoul for revenge. She'd wanted Ji-hoon to hurt the way she'd hurt, to see what he'd thrown away, to understand the magnitude of his abandonment. And she'd gotten that. The press conference, the public acknowledgement, the satisfaction of watching his perfect life crack under the weight of truth. But somewhere along the way, revenge had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation. But maybe acceptance. Acceptance that people were complicated, that growth was possible, that the best revenge wasn't destruction but building something better. Ji-hoon would never be her partner. Too much had happened. Too many years had passed. Too much trust had been broken. But he was Kai's father, and he was trying, and that was enough. She was successful, respected, fulfilled. She had a son who was brilliant and kind. She had a career that challenged her. She had friendships that sustained her. She had built a life entirely on her own terms. And maybe that was the real ending to this story. Not the dramatic confrontation or the public vindication or even the careful co-parenting they'd negotiated. Just the quiet victory of surviving, thriving, refusing to let anyone else's choices determine her worth. Love hadn't saved her. Choice had. The choice to leave. The choice to stay gone. The choice to return. The choice to fight. The choice to let go. The choice to build something new from the ashes of what had burned. Every choice had mattered. Every choice had built her. And standing in Paris with her son laughing beside her, and the past finally where it belonged, behind her, Amara Chen felt something she'd fought for but never quite believed she'd achieve. Freedom. Not from the past, because the past was always there, shaping and informing. But freedom from its power over her. Freedom from shame, from anger, from the need for revenge or vindication or any external validation. She was enough. Had always been enough. And finally, after years of fighting to prove it, she believed it. Kai pulled her toward a cafe promising the best hot chocolate in Paris. Ji-hoon followed, already pulling out his wallet. And Amara let herself be pulled, let herself enjoy this moment, let herself feel grateful for the complicated, messy, imperfect life they'd all built together. The story didn't end with happily ever after. It ended with honestly, messily ever after. With people doing their best. With mistakes acknowledged and amends attempted. With a child loved by multiple people in different, imperfect ways. With a woman who'd saved herself and built an empire from the ashes of abandonment. And maybe that was better than any fairy tale ending. Because it was real. Years later, when Kai was 22 and graduating from architecture school with honors, both his parents attended. They sat on opposite sides of the auditorium, brought different groups of friends, led separate lives that intersected only around their shared son. And that was fine. That was healthy. That was what healing looked like. Kai gave a speech about building structures that serve communities rather than just aesthetics. About creating spaces where all people felt welcome. About the responsibility of architects to consider who their designs excluded and why. His voice was confident, his vision clear, his purpose evident. Amara watched him and saw everything she'd fought for made flesh. This brilliant, compassionate, confident young man who existed because she'd refused to let anyone else determine her worth or his future. Who'd grown up knowing he was wanted, loved, valuable not because of his father's name, but because of who he was. After the ceremony, the three of them took photos together. Just a few, at Kai's insistence. Evidence that broken things could be transformed into something functional, if not always beautiful. Evidence that families came in many forms. Evidence that showing up mattered more than biology. Then they went their separate ways. Ji-hoon to a dinner with Kai and his Seoul family. Amara to a celebration with Kai and his Paris family. The young man splitting time between two worlds, comfortable in both, limited by neither. And Amara, standing in a Paris restaurant surrounded by people who loved her, raising a glass to her son's achievements, felt the weight of the past finally settle into something manageable. Not gone, never gone, but transformed, integrated. Part of the foundation she'd built rather than the cage that had trapped her. Someone asked her if she had any regrets. She thought about 23-year-old Amara, pregnant and alone and terrified. She thought about every difficult choice, every sacrifice, every moment of wondering if she'd done the right thing. She thought about the years of struggle and the eventual triumph. She thought about the press conference and the threats and the decision to fight back. She thought about letting Ji-hoon try to be better and watching him actually become better. No, she said finally. No regrets. Just lessons. And she meant it. Because she'd survived everything that was supposed to break her. She'd built everything she was supposed to be denied. She'd protected the person who mattered most and created a legacy that had nothing to do with scandal or revenge or proving anyone wrong. She'd simply lived. Fully, messily, honestly. And that was its own revolution. The story of the stylist who destroyed a perfect wedding with 3 words evolved over time into something more nuanced. The story of a woman who refused to be silenced. The story of a mother protecting her child. The story of complicated people making complicated choices and living with the consequences. But for Amara, it was simpler than that. It was just the story of how she saved herself. And that story, she knew, would never truly end. Because every day she woke up and chose herself, chose her son, chose the life she'd built, she was writing new chapters. Some dramatic, some quiet, all of them hers. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.